So there's a lot of, people like to hate on the guys who are at the top. It's just the way it is in all sports. Do you see a scenario where if Phil were to win, or if Phil were to come in just amazing, show that last year was an aberration, he comes back, it's all-time best. Do you see the crowd turning around and falling in love with him and respecting the physique that he brings? Because that'd be cool too. If Phil shows up and he's so on the money, so amazing, the best we've ever seen him, that all those boos suddenly turn to cheers.
I don't see it happening because I think people always love to hate the champion.
Yeah.
Now, if Phil lost one year and he made a comeback, everyone would be rooting for him. Yeah. But people they don't want to see the same champion every year. It just gets boring for them. I think the guy who deserves to win should win. I don't care. Like Ronnie deserved all those victories because he deserved it. And it's tough shit on everyone else that Ronnie was the best bodybuilder for 8 years in a row, or 7 years in a row maybe. But
I still like Jay in 01. But
yeah, I did like Jay, but Ronnie wasn't terrible.
No, not at all.
So the bottom line is everyone wants to see Phil beat. So I can't imagine a scenario, even if he looks amazing, that they wouldn't vote for him. But although the people in the arena tend to be better bodybuilding fans than the haters who are at home. If it was involving everyone at home, I'd say there's no way Phil can win. If it's involving people in the theater, I can see maybe Phil.
There is a big gap between what goes on in that venue and what goes on in people's living rooms. It's actually amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
you come home, and we all do this. You spend the weekend, we're busy, we're hosting stuff, doing all the stuff that we do, and then you get home and you log on to the computer and you can. So what do people think of the weekend? Because you don't have time to look at it while you're there, right? So you come home. And the feedback makes you realize that you saw a completely different contest.
What happens if Dexter Jackson wins the people's choice?
And he could, right?
Yeah, because he's very well liked, and Dexter would take that. And he'd add the 8 from he has the 08 Olympia. He'd add 18 to his title. To his Instagram.
There's going to be a lot of abuse of privileges with that. Just the same way you see guys who win these other divisions and they get introduced as Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, right. You could see that happening. Although I think that a lot of the top guys would not want to have to bear the onus of not having won the Olympia, but are the people's choice. It's almost like the paper mache Mr. Olympia, as my dad
That's
said.
right.
That
That's
kind of
right. Everybody wants to be the people's champ, right? That's the thing.
The scenarios are what make everything interesting, I think, on Olympia weekend, and I think that's why they do this stuff to hype it up.
Yeah.
I think they figure, well, who cares? The ultimate Mr. Olympia is going to be the ultimate Mr. Olympia. Nothing's going to change that. Let people argue and debate. It makes the Olympia that much.
Are you surprised that they don't bring out the 212 winner and put him with the Mr. Olympia champion? Look, back in the day, they used to do it, right?
I know.
Olympia.
I've been saying they should do that since the beginning.
I mean, at the very least, the fans deserve to see what it looks like.
Since the beginning, I would like to see. I'd love to see, especially this being Flex Lewis's last year as a 212.
Which we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah. Flex Lewis, it's funny, I had heard a rumor that this was his last year, and I texted him, and he kind of blew me off a little bit. He's like, don't believe everything you hear. And then because we were talking about, I didn't know this, but I don't know if you know this, Flex Lewis used to breed birds, finches, parrots, parakeets, racing pigeons.
Okay.
Because we have that, and he knows I breed reptiles and everything like that. So we were talking, I'm like, is it true this is your last year? And he didn't say anything. He kind of blew me off, and then obviously the announcement coming. I think he's going to come back into the open. I think that's going to be tremendous.
Yeah, he's good. I know that Neil Hill is trainer, and people who are close to Flex, who train with him, everybody wants to see what that body could look like without the limitations of being under 212 pounds. To the point where his body is trying to explode through that division.
Yeah.
I actually feel sometimes that Flex may have almost overstayed his welcome in that division. Now, there's no bigger fan of Flex Lewis than me. I love the guy. He's a great champion. He works hard. It's hard not to like Flex, right? But I'm a little worried about him this year because that division was created for that sort of younger muscle, those cleaner lines, kind of that David Henry type look back when it started. And now Flex is a more mature body.
Yeah.
It's a little grainier. The lines flow a little differently. Yeah. Still a great physique, and it will still probably win next month. Yeah. But I'll tell you, it ain't a foregone conclusion.
He doesn't like the criticism he's getting, and I understand where he's coming from. He knows he's not his best.
Right.
He can't be his best at that weight.
Right.
He's his best probably at 220, 218. He can't get down to 212 and be his best. So when people criticize him, he knows the criticism is real.
Yeah.
And there's nothing he can do about it. You can't fill up in a day or two and regain what you had to do to make that weight. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
You could look good, but you can't look great. So I think he wants to come onto a bodybuilding stage and look his best. I mean, look at Lee Priest. Lee Priest competed with all the open guys.
Sure.
He was shorter than Flex.
Yeah.
And he did great. He won shows, big shows. And so I think I don't think Flex will win the Olympia, but I think that Flex will be a very, very dangerous competitor.
Right now, is Flex a top 7 bodybuilder in the big division?
Now, the way he looks this minute, no, but I think in a year he will be.
He would be.
Yeah,
right.
I think he could. I think he could possibly definitely break the top 10 if he
Sure.
Olympia. And I think that he might be even higher.
Right.
Look, Bonak's up there. How much bigger is Bonak than him?
Couldn't Bonak win? Bonak's good.
There's a scenario where he could have won.
Yeah.
I thought he should have beat Ramy last year, and if Phil had been off, a little more than he was, Bonak would have won.
I kind of feel like Bonak, not that their physiques compare, but I feel like Bonak represents what Dexter used to represent, being that guy where if the guys miss it, that he's that guy who you kind of know what you're going to get now, and he's good.
The problem with Bonak is that he's not as consistent as Dexter is, and that's why Dexter is
Who is though? Nobody is.
No one is, and that's. But you know what? Phil is kind of consistent too, and that's where his Olympia, Mr. Consistency, I call him, and that's why he's been able to win so many times. If Dexter was as big as Phil, okay, Dexter would be winning the Olympia 20 times, the last couple of years. But Phil came up, he was younger, he had a little bit fresher muscle, he was a little bigger, a little rounder, more cartoonish. And he's a better version of Dexter, is really what he is, But when he's off, Dexter exploits that, and that's why Dexter is so dangerous, waiting in the wings,
That's right.
It's like George Foreman, when George Foreman made that crazy comeback, and everyone's like, what is this old fat guy doing? But you knew he had that knockout punch, and Michael Moore stepped in front of him, and boom, Foreman knocked him out and became world champion. So Dex is there also. Yes. Don't count him out. People keep forgetting him. I think he's more dangerous than Sean Roden is.
I mean, just the story of Dexter finishing in the top 5 again this year. It's
every year.
It's unbelievable. Every single year, guys come and they go, and then there's Dexter. He's got a spot in the top 5 every single year, and it's remarkable. And to me, it's one of the greatest achievements in sports. It's like to be able to do what he's doing decade in, decade out.
It's like Lou Gehrig.
It's nuts, right?
He's got that longevity aspect going on, and he knows how to not abuse his body so that he can continue to get more mileage out of it. And that's the best way to say it.
As an Oriole fan, though, I'm offended. I would say he's Cal Ripken.
Cal Ripken. All right, sorry.
But I feel you.
I thought Lou Gehrig would be like
there we
trophy.
go.
The point is that, this Olympia is really open. I think if a Kai Green steps in, it's a real wild card. But even without him, Big Ramy is surging. We're just waiting for this guy to deliver the goods. Phil knows he's there. Phil knows that, if Ramy ever comes in at 100%, which he hasn't yet, he's in trouble.
What's your take on the commercial implications in terms of the business of bodybuilding? If a bodybuilder from that region, from that part of the world, the part of the world that we know is very fanatical about bodybuilding, they love bodybuilding over there, there's a whole infrastructure over there. If they had the champion, it probably wouldn't be bad for the sport in terms of the business of bodybuilding, right?
No, look what Dorian won. It didn't ruin anything, right?
Right, Samir, those kind of things.
I don't think that there's ever a bad champion, and I don't think there's ever a bad change. I think change is always good because it refreshes the sport a little bit. I don't think that we ever thought there would be a Ramy that would come out of the woodwork like that. So he's waiting there, and probably the bystander who's looking at pictures is like, this guy's not. He didn't win.
Right.
Well, we know the nuances of why he didn't win and why he's not his best yet, and why he hasn't. What the reasoning is why the judges haven't picked him. But once he does win, because he will win eventually, I think.
I agree.
I think that it will be undeniable. Everyone will say, of course he's Mr. Olympia. Look at the size of this guy.
Yes.
He's out unbelievable.
It's funny because you just mentioned we didn't know he existed, right? And we used to say that when Phil started winning the Olympiads, the first couple, we used to say that people would ask, so who's going to be the next Mr. Olympia? Who's the guy who's going to beat Phil? And we would all look around at the current crop of champions and we'd say, he doesn't exist. We don't know who he is yet. Yeah. And then suddenly Ramy appeared.
Right.
And Ramy is legit. And I know you weren't that high on what you saw from Ramy last year.
No, I thought his conditioning was not that good.
I was impressed. We had different seats. It was a different angle, but I was pretty impressed by him. And I felt that what he showed, and I thought this was important, the conditioning in years past had been really off. He hadn't found his rhythm. What I saw last year was a guy who looks like he was figuring it out. It was obvious to me that he was starting to find the formula. And if that's the case, there's no stopping.
I thought when he worked with Chris Aceto the year before, I thought for the pre-judging in Olympia, he was too flat. He didn't look good.
Right.
For the night show, he looked great. And then he won the Arnold Europe the week after. I thought that was the best I've ever seen him. I thought that look could have possibly beaten Phil last year. But he didn't bring that look. He brought a bigger look because they like big in the Middle East.
Sure.
Kuwait, they were big. All their guys, Rulli. And it works for a lot of these guys.
Brandon.
But I think Ramy's so big that he doesn't need to be bigger.
Yeah.
And I think at this point they have to just play the conditioning game. And I think when he comes in with conditioning, Phil won't beat him.
You mentioned Rulli. This guy is, when you look at Rulli Winkler, what comes to mind? What do you think of when you see him? It's funny because we've all been around this long enough where nothing freaks us out anymore.
He's the biggest guy.
He's the biggest man maybe ever.
Yeah, he's bigger than Ramy.
Exist.
He's bigger than Ramy.
He's the biggest human to ever exist. When they show these images of this guy, it's like a living, walking, breathing Photoshop. Things are happening that just don't happen. It's unbelievable.
I think the problem with Rulli is that he's too big and he's lost a little bit of proportion.
Right.
Which, as a bodybuilding fan, I don't care almost because I'm just like, look at this muscle.
Look at that muscle.
But I think the aesthetics are not quite as good. Ramy's got very good aesthetics for a big guy. He's very balanced, upper and lower.
Yeah.
There's nothing out of proportion. So I think that Ramy has a better chance of winning Olympia. There's your people's champion, maybe.
Yeah,
Rulli Winkler.
Well, it's funny because when I was talking,
he might be your people's champion.
I was talking to Bob Chick the other day. Bob Chick and I have like our weekly 1 hour phone call, and we spent about 10 minutes of the call talking about this people's champion. And Bob said you could write it down that Rulli wins it because Rulli is so popular.
He's such a freak. Yeah, he's a freak. It's like Marcus Rule would have been the people's champion back in the day, probably, because he never would have won the Olympia, but people just loved the size and sheer.
Like Rulli's the guy that would have done the formerly known Night of Champions and would have won it every single year back when they were awarded physiques.
Right, because that's what people like. And after all, at the bare roots, grassroots, that's what bodybuilding is. It's about building muscle and coming in gnarly, freaky hard.
Yes.
And the fans don't necessarily care about aesthetics as much as you think, even though there is this like social media movement for the classic looks.
Right.
Most people don't give a crap about that. Most of the fans want hardcore muscle, and that's what we grew up with.
Well, especially now that there's all these other divisions where those other physiques
they have a
can
place.
be showcased, right? So now it's like if we're going to get to the big stage, let's showcase the big bodies. I am one of those people who does like the physique to flow. I do like a degree of aesthetics. I marvel, especially in the early years of Phil Heath, I used to marvel over that three-dimensional muscle.
I thought when he lost the Arnold Classic to Kai, what was it, 2010?
That sounds about right.
He was unbelievable.
Yeah.
If you want to go back and look, guys, if you're watching, go back and watch some of the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
He was unbelievable. His waist was teeny tiny. His proportion, his size was perfect. I thought. I thought he didn't need to get any bigger. Of course, as a bodybuilder, we all want to be bigger.
Sure.
But I thought that should have been Mr. Olympia right there. And that was the ideal physique. So I think that Phil genetically was meant to be Mr. Olympia, but every Mr. Olympia we've ever had, as they've gotten later into their years, toward the end of their reign, their aesthetics have gotten off a little bit. Because you know what happens? Everything grows, including your waist.
That's
and
right.
you never have that. Ronnie, his 99, 98 waist was teeny.
Right.
His 2004 or 5 waist was a lot thicker.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes.
You still look forward to going to the Olympia every year?
Yeah, I do. I missed the Arnold Classic for the first time in
I did too.
25 years. Oh, you
I didn't go this year either. Yeah.
And what to tell you the truth, I don't even know if I'm going to go to the Olympia. I haven't decided yet. It's very hard with young kids to make that sacrifice, to leave my wife alone for that many days without, me being there. I don't know. We'll see. If I have a sponsor, I might be able to justify going. If I don't, I might let Chris and the crew do their thing over there, and I might just
it's funny. Like we all bitch and complain about stuff throughout the year. Whenever I get to Vegas for the Olympia, it's that one moment where I had this real renewed appreciation. I fall in love with bodybuilding again every year in September. I go to the Olympia. Of course, you got Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. They're all there. It's a great energy. Anybody who starts talking about the demise of bodybuilding, you walk inside that Orleans Arena, you see Robin Cheng's stage production, you see the energy in the building, you appreciate the historic importance of what you're at. It's the singular greatest event in bodybuilding. And it makes me love bodybuilding again. And that's why I keep going back. Because throughout the year, it's easy to get cynical and to get caught up in the minutia of the negative stuff. But the Olympia, it's the hallmark, and I love it.
It's the Super Bowl. Let's face it. And, who doesn't want to go to the Super Bowl?
That's right.
And that's the Super Bowl of our sport.
That's right.
That's what, that's what, and I understand what you're talking about. You do get you almost get excited about bodybuilding.
Yeah, you become proud to be a part of this community when you go out to the
And for some reason, whenever I go to these big events, something controversial always goes down between me and someone else, and it becomes more than just the Olympia weekend or the Arnold weekend. It's me and Sean Ray, or me and this person,
But you're always the common denominator.
I don't know what it is. It's like I'm a very polarizing.
You are.
You know what it is? Because I have very strong opinions, Dan.
That's right.
And I'm not afraid to give my opinions. And I think the fans appreciate that. Some don't, but most of them do. And what happens is that on those weekends, you're so charged up trying to do contest coverage and this and that and opinions that someone invariably, people buck heads. And a lot of times people back down, but I don't back down from strong opinions. And I feel that it's my duty as a press person to respond to that because the fans expect that.
People ask me about all sorts of members of the bodybuilding media, and I get asked about you a lot, and I always say that Dave Palumbo is willing to go there. He's willing to go where I'm not willing to go.
Right.
He's willing to go where most guys aren't willing to go. There's a lot of times where you'll do something and I will vehemently disagree with the fact that you just did that or you just did that interview, but it's served you well. Every industry has somebody who serves the role that you serve. So, and you work hard, and I respect what you do. But yeah, you are willing to go places that most people aren't willing to go.
Because you know what? The only way change can happen is if someone speaks up about it. And I'm not saying that I'm responsible for all the change that occurs, but I'd like to believe that a lot of the things that have been created in our sport maybe changed. Maybe I had a little something to do with it, just by opening my big mouth. And and somehow it trickled back down, and 5 years later they decided to make a change because of that. Yeah. So someone has to at least put the thought out there, because if no one does, then the sport stagnates and we don't see any improvement.
And the worst thing that could happen is for people to stop talking about bodybuilding, and that does concern me. Here we are, 9 weeks out from the biggest event of the year. We have a guy who's about to try to catch the biggest record in bodybuilding. These are big stories. We have the Kai Green story. We have Flex Lewis competing in the 212 for the final time. We have so many other dynamics in the other divisions that are playing out. I'd like to see more chatter. So it's important for all of us to do our part some people talk about manufacturing storylines. Well, I say, manufacturing if you got to. Do whatever you got to do. Let's get people talking about bodybuilding.
Dan, I always do this every year for the Arnold. I always do pre-interviews with all these guys. I get the people on who people are talking about. I do it for the Olympia too. And you know what I get? I get stonewalled with the top guys because they're still with the stupid exclusivity. Why is Phil Heath exclusive? When Arnold would go, and do the Olympia or promote movies, he'd go on every talk show in the entire world. Let's face it. Because publicity is good for the movie. Same for the Olympia. Put a Mr. Olympia shirt on him with Flex Magazine, with all his sponsors on it, and send him out and let him do media for everyone to promote the Olympic. You know what? The guy actually might be a liked guy after that. Yeah. If I got him in the studio here, or if I got him on Skype and interviewed him, I guarantee you more people would like this guy, because I've talked to him alone, and he has a good heart. He's a good guy. I think he's a misunderstood champion because he's very passionate about what he does. He gets mad when people critique him. I guarantee if I sat down and interviewed him, guarantee if you sat down and interviewed him, people would have a different appreciation.
There's no question about it. I actually watched Phil do an interview with somebody who I'm not familiar with, but he talked about his life and his approach to business and all that, and I came away really appreciating Phil's brain.
Yeah, no, I saw the same interview.
You saw that interview, right? Yeah. It's very well done.
I don't know why they won't let this guy do interviews with, and it's really only exclusivity.
It's only him now, though. There's not a lot of guys who have those deals.
It's only exclusionary for probably you, me, and the
other bodybuilding outlets.
Yeah, I don't know why. He can do TV. Let the guy do as many interviews as he wants. It's good for the freaking Mr. Olympia contest. I don't understand it. Same thing with Dexter, and they got a couple other guys under. There should be no more exclusive contracts. It's the social media age. Everyone should be able to interview anywhere they want, because it's going to only help the sport.
Well, the good news is we are trending in that direction. One of the reasons I started digitalmuscle.com is because there weren't very many exclusives anymore. I have great content providers all over the world who have the freedom to provide content. Yes, Phil Heath is the #1 bodybuilder on the planet. He still has his deal with the Weider AMI people, and that's fine.
It's ridiculous.
But there's fewer, and the fact that we can sit here, by the way, and do this now shows how much things have changed. Because there was a time where my contractual limitations would prevent me from this from happening.
So, but I understand that, because when there was magazines, there was a reason to have exclusive. But you know what the truth is? Phil's exclusive, and no one even uses him over there. They're not even using him. Maybe they'll have one interview with this guy. Why not let their champion let the Mr. Olympia, who represents the sport, he's like the president of the United States for bodybuilding.
That's right.
Let him go out there and give his speeches and give his interviews and represent. He's a guy who's very well spoken. That's why one of the reasons why they got him in there to begin with.
That's true.
Because he's a good representative. Let the guy represent.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the one thing that I really have a problem with.
And you should, but I think the good news is we're getting close to it. And we're getting close to it, I think, simply because where print media is headed, right?
Well, it's not headed. It's gone.
There. The resources aren't there to limit those guys the way it used to
Flex Lewis is dying to sit down and interview with me. He's dying. He'd drive down here probably sit next to me.
Can he do that now?
No, he's under contract.
I thought he had the freedom to do that now.
No, he does not. He does not, and he would love to. Maybe when he vacates the title, he'll be able to do it. I don't know. But what are they using him for? What was the last interview you saw with Flex Lewis?
Well, I saw the one that they just did on Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine where he announced his decision.
Right, but that was just like kind of an news update. Come on, let's get this guy. He's the best interview of all time.
Right.
This guy is the Conor McGregor of the bodybuilding world. I mean, he just wants to talk, and he's not afraid to call people out and be controversial. Come on, you want excitement in the sport? Let these guys talk. Open up, take the gag orders off everyone, and let these people talk, because you know what? That's what the fans want. You don't need a people's champion. Let the champions themselves go out there and be the people's champion and speak. I guarantee you, if you didn't lock these guys behind prison doors and not let them speak to anyone, they would actually be more liked by the public, because the public would get to know who they are, personality-wise.
No question about it. And it is one of the things that has really held bodybuilding back. But those seeds were planted long ago.
I know it's an old guard system. It's like an antiquated system that doesn't serve any purpose.
The system's
anymore.
so crazy that even in 2005, when I started Pro Bodybuilding Weekly Talk Radio, I actually signed Jay Cutler to my radio show.
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
Think of the absurdity of that. Yeah. I look back on that now, and it seems crazy. But me and Bob, we sat down, we did a deal, and he wasn't allowed to appear on any other radio shows, which now I laugh at the concept, but at the time, it was a big score, right? Jay couldn't go on your show or anybody else's show.
Right, well, at the time, I was working for Muscular Development Magazine, and Blackman was going crazy with you, Dan Solomon, because you would always try to scoff up the interview before he did, and you would put the kibosh on interviews. And it was fun back then because you were bodybuilding.com, Steve had Muscular Development, and there was Flex that didn't really have a radio show, but they were providing content for you guys. So it was this whole war, which was fun. There's no war anymore. The war's over. No one won. The only people who won are the people still surviving. That's you and me, and I can't even say that MD survived, because they're like on the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. But the bottom line is that exclusivity doesn't serve anymore.
The most important thing that we needed to have happen is we needed everybody to thrive, because that competition is what put money in all of our pockets, right? When Side A had to compete with Side B and had to spend money to be better than Side B, we all won. The athletes won, all of us in the media won. But now that's not the case. They're just struggling to get by, so we don't have that competitive spirit anymore, which forces people to spend money. Right. So as a result, the athletes aren't getting their contracts anymore. The whole model has changed for guys like us.
So you got to let these guys promote themselves.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they can't make money. If you interviewed Flex Lewis and I interviewed Flex Lewis, it would be two completely different interviews, and they wouldn't clash, and people would watch both, and they would think they were both great.
That's right.
Because I would ask him completely different questions than you would.
Yeah, no, it would be great.
You wouldn't ask him about his personal life. You wouldn't ask him about, what his, hobbies are. You wouldn't ask him about, how close the competition was. You would ask him very conservative.
So what would I ask him?
You would ask.
You just painted my interview as dangerously boring.
You're Larry King. You ask all the questions people want to know about. Everything that people like, all the background. It'll be very organized. Flex will come out as like Marlon Brando in your interview, and people will love it. And then I'll get him, and I'll ask him every little dirty secret that he's got, and all the things that people think, oh, I can't believe you asked him that question. But what do you say?
Right.
And so it'll be two separate interviews, and that's what he needs, because it'll basically diversify him and show that he has different dimensions to his character.
That's right.
And you can get a third person who can interview him and get a completely different story about him. They can talk about something else, his dog breeding business, So that's, and then all of a sudden people say, wow, Flex Lewis is a pretty fucking interesting person.
That's true.
But now they don't know what he is, because he can't talk to anyone.
That's right. The limitations are very...
I'm glad we agree. Dan and I actually agree. Mark this down. What's today's date? July what?
We need to...
2018?
I think the interview that would be really good is I've never really interviewed you the way you need to be interviewed. And your story, you hide up here in this treehouse up here, right? And you do your thing. But your story is pretty good. And to be honest with you, my favorite part about doing what we all do is I love the stories. Joe Weider always used to say to us, he always used to say it's about, we talked about this before, it's about the stories, it's not about the physiques. The physiques are what we see, but what makes this industry run are the stories. And I love the stories. I love stories about guys who went from here to here and back here and the things that they went through, and even the athletes and what inspired them, what motivated them to do what they do. And on the business side, there's some remarkable stories of success and unbelievable failure, things that we can all learn from and be motivated by. That to me is I was actually at one point when people still wrote books. When people still read books, rather. I was going to write a book, something like a business.
That's why I haven't written a book, because no one reads them anymore.
Right, there you go. But I was going to write where I was going to take like the 15 most compelling people that I've had the privilege of sitting down with and telling their stories.
Right.
And it would almost be like a college course type book, because these stories are remarkable.
And they teach lessons too.
And they teach lessons, they teach business, they teach failure, they teach success. And I've always thought that that's sort of the thing that has kept me doing this for as long as I've been doing this.
It's the people. It's the stories that they have to tell. And that's when I interview people, I try to find that story behind what's going on, because there's a story behind every single person,
That's
even the most boring person. And as an interviewer, if you can find that story, then you did your job.
That's right.
And that's that. And sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes I fail. I'm like, you know what, that was a terrible interview. And people might like it anyway, but I feel like I failed. But then sometimes I get to the heart of who that person is, and all of a sudden they unlock something that they had never talked about. And I'm like, that was the interview that I needed to do.
We're all in search of that one.
I interviewed Dorian Yates. Actually.
Okay.
I was the last person. I purposely waited to be the last person to interview because I had that opportunity.
He's not dead. He can
I mean in terms of like all these media sources. When Dorian made himself available, a lot of people interviewed him. And people said, "Do you want to interview him?" Because they knew I had wanted to interview him. And I said, "I'm not ready yet." And I interviewed him recently, and it was a 4-part interview, and I thought it was probably one of the better interviews I've ever done. And I think a lot of people agree with that. And while Dorian revealed a lot about his character and who he was and competing and what it was like to compete and what he felt, all the things he went through, all the questions I wanted to know because Dorian never talked about anything when he was competing.
Nope.
I asked him all the questions I had, which people liked. But then I got the last part, I got to ask him about some of his social beliefs. And we talked about the Holocaust and how, because he had put out some controversial statements about how didn't believe that it really was the Holocaust.
Right.
He was telling me that the Jewish people had swimming pools and they had softball leagues there, and no one was really killed, and they just died of starvation. And I was able to challenge him. Now this was not something I even thought would happen, because I thought maybe he would say, "Oh, I didn't really believe that," but that was his belief.
Sure.
And I challenged it, and it was real, and it was real drama, and it was not edited, and it was his beliefs versus what I believed, and people liked that because it was real. And afterwards he called me up and he says, "You think we should take that off?" Because he didn't know I was going to ask him that. I said, "No, that's your beliefs." I said, "You're entitled to those beliefs, and that's fine. And that's what makes you Dorian Yates." He says, "You know what, you're right." So we left it in there. And I thought that was the reason why that interview was so potent, because that was really the way he felt, that he wasn't ashamed to say it, and I wasn't ashamed to challenge him. It was a very uncomfortable situation because I always looked up to Dorian, and I still do. I think he was one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, and he's a very interesting person.
Well,
but it was a hard interview to do.
And it's interesting that you say that, because when we started doing this years back, the bar was lower. We could interview a guy about sets and reps, and people were fascinated. I remember when I first started doing Pro Bodybuilding Weekly, people would call in or they would write in and they would say,
"Ask him what he eats for breakfast."
They would say things like, "Wow, that's the first time I ever heard Sean Ray speak," And unfortunately now we hear Sean Ray speak all the time.
Now no one wants to hear that.
But in all seriousness, we have the situation where back then, people just wanted to grasp at any piece of information about their contest prep, their carb to protein, their sodium manipulation. They were cool with all that stuff. And now with the access that the world has to these people, that's not enough. No. So what you're doing is really important, Dave, because you're going there and you're creating a layer of exposure and disclosure for these athletes that they need, because the fans, the people who consume this information, they want more. They need more. It's no longer good enough for them to just come on and have some sugar-coated interview, because there's not enough there to keep people amused.
People want to know that these guys are real people
Right.
with real problems and real issues in life and real solutions. Because a lot of look, to be a champion, you have to be able to solve problems.
Right.
And Dorian Yates was a great problem solver.
Yep.
He overcame a lot of injuries and drama in his life to win 6 Olympias.
That's right.
In the most unbelievable fashion of the time. And that's what made him so special. Ronnie Coleman too. Look at Ronnie Coleman. Or you feel bad for Ronnie Coleman. Doesn't feel bad for Ronnie Coleman. I feel bad that Ronnie Coleman's in so much pain.
Right.
But he wouldn't trade it for the world.
No.
He won 8 Olympias. And that was important to him. So that's an important story.
Very important.
Look, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, he's crazy. Look what he did to his body. He's crippled now, or he can't walk, and he's in pain chronically. But Ronnie Coleman doesn't care about that. I mean, he doesn't want to be in pain, but Ronnie Coleman would not trade a single day for those titles that he had. That he did what he wanted on his time, and he always reveals that in his interviews.
Yeah.
He never says, "No, I don't regret anything.
Yeah.
I regret that I didn't do more weight." And so that's real. That's drama. That's what people want to see, because you know what? There's not many people that are willing to go there.
That's right.
Sacrifice their body, sacrifice themselves. Give up pleasure to achieve something.
That's right.
And that's why there's not that many great people out there. There's a lot of people that just kind of, live their life and are happy with their families and never going to do crazy great things in their life because they're just not willing to go there. That's why we enjoy watching the people who are, because it inspires us.
Well, you get inspired by the people who trust you to help them tell their story, right? I've told you the story in the past, the Reg Park story, right?
Yeah.
And Reg Park, contacted me, and we all knew that he had months to live.
That was a great interview.
And that was something that meant so much to me, because he was basically asking me
This was his last interview.
to help him tell his story to the world, knowing that it would be the final time he would tell that story.
Yeah.
So it's a big responsibility, and it's
Yeah.
obviously one you take seriously.
Yeah,
I know
that
I
was a
do
great
as
interview,
well.
you did, by the way. I remember.
But there's just been so many great moments, and there's so many great people in our industry, and as long as we have access to them, we can continue to do what we
access.
do.
That's the key.
That's right.
No more gag orders. Remove the blinders.
That's right.
But Dan, thank you for stopping by and coming
man.
down
It's
to
a
the
pleasure.
theater. I didn't think we'd see you in Cape Coral. I know it's like in Long Island. People on the North Shore don't like to go to the South Shore. People in Florida, the East Coasters usually stay the East Coast, and I was West Coast.
We stay in a little bubble, but before I head out, I got to give a shout out. House of Pain dressed me today.
Nice. I love the new House of Pain clothing, by the way.
Joe Corbett and the crew at House of Pain, you guys are killing it, doing a great job. HouseofPain.com. And I'm also wearing this cap. You guys might not know what this cap is.
I thought it was San Diego.
It is not a San Diego cap.
Okay.
This is a Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School
Wow.
baseball cap. Now, you guys might know that I am from Parkland, Florida.
Yes.
So we unfortunately had
that shooting,
an
that's terrible.
unbelievable situation there, and so many families continued to heal, and so many people are doing some amazing things to make sure something like that does not happen again. So a shout out to everybody at Stoneman Douglas and to all the great people in Parkland. And Dave, man, it was fun doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan Solomon in the RXMuscle studios. This might be a precedent in history that may never be repeated. I hope it will be, though. Sometimes you got to have me down to your studios. Do you even have a studio?
Come on down. I don't have a studio like this. I don't have a setup like this. But you know what, though? If I know you're coming, I'll build something for you.
Okay,
That's
that
right.
sounds good enough. All right, guys. I know this has been a very long interview. We'll probably break it up into 2 parts because I thought it was that good. For now, though, we're out of time until next week. I am Dave Palumbo here with Dan Solomon. We'll see you next time.